The Tibetan Teachings on Death and the Afterlife. L. Adams Beck. It is impossible to omit the countries of Tibet and Mongolia in a survey of Asiatic thought, and this book would be incomplete indeed if I passed over the extraordinary and illuminative Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Liberation by Hearing on the After-Death Plane, which Dr. Evans Wentz has lately issued in translation, and to which I referred in a previous chapter. I hope my summary may send many to the book itself, for I regard it as one of the most remarkable gifts from East to West that have yet been given. There are people for whom it will reconstitute their thoughts on death. The book is a translation from very early Buddhist documents in Tibet, so ancient that in some of the funeral ceremonies are unmistakable references to the original Bon religion of the Tibetans, which preceded Buddhism in that strange country, and itself taught the doctrine of rebirth. Buddhism was introduced into Tibet from two sources by the King Srong Tsan Gampo, who died AD 650. He married a princess of the royal house of Nepal, which was a Buddhist country, and also a princess of the Chinese imperial family. These two princesses brought Buddhism with them, and the seed was sown. This king's powerful successor, Srong Detsun, reigned from 740 to 786 AD, and it was he, a powerful ruler, who invited the precious teacher Padmasambhava to come to Tibet and spread the Buddhist light. He was a professor of yoga in the great Buddhist University of Nalanda in India and famous for his knowledge of the occult. It is from his original influence that Tibet has since been the home of the occultism of Buddhism. He had many books on those subjects hidden with mystic ceremonies. They were not for the general reader. Some are preserved in the monasteries of Tibet. The book of which I write is supposed to be one of these, and should be regarded as having been compiled during the first centuries of Lamaism in the time of Padmasambhava, or very soon after. It is believed that in addition to his own wisdom, he was fortified by the assistance of 8 gurus, teachers, in India, each representing a different aspect of the doctrines he taught. The translation presented by Dr. Evans Wentz was made by a very remarkable Lama named Kazi Dawa Samdup, who died in Calcutta in 1922. He was known to the British authorities for his learning and character, was attached to the political staff of the Dalai Lama when he visited India from Lhasa, and he later became lecturer in Tibetan to the University of Calcutta, where he died. Dr. Evans Wentz and Sir John Woodroffe, reader of Indian law in the University of Oxford, speak in the highest terms of this young man and his attainments. Dr. Evans Wentz modestly describes himself as the mouthpiece and English dictionary of this Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup, of whom he was a recognized disciple. But those who read his powerful introduction to the book will allot him a very different position. His experience in Asia and among Asiatic teachers has been great and varied, and we must hope much more from his knowledge and the untranslated texts he still holds. In my summary, I shall not use the Tibetan Buddhist symbols, which, though natural and beautiful to the Oriental or scholarly mind, are comparatively useless to Western truth-seekers. In as plain English as possible, I shall describe the various stages of this extraordinary and beautiful guidebook for the dead. It teaches the art or science of death. A Western writer has said, "Thou shalt understand that it is a science most profitable and passing all other sciences for to learn to die. For a man to know that he shall die is common to all men, but thou shalt find few who have the cunning wisdom to learn to die. I shall give thee the mystery of this doctrine, the which shall profit thee greatly to the establishment of ghostly health and to a stable fundament of all virtues." Such is the aim also of the Tibetan Book of Death. It is written for the guidance of the dead man during the 49 symbolic days which he must spend in the bardo, or intermediate state of the dead, before reincarnation or ultimate union with the divine. Passages from this book are read in his ear during dying, following death, and afterwards, at intervals, for the 49 days. They are for the guidance of the deceased during the ordeal to which his past life has exposed him. His time in the bardo is divided into 3 stages, entirely conditioned by his own past thoughts and deeds. He passes into a swoon or trance, into one awakening and then another, until the third bardo ends. In the second bardo, he meets in symbolic visions all the hallucinations he created for himself as the result of his earthly thoughts and deeds. His thought forms now pass before him in a solemn and mighty panorama, which, if he is not instructed, he takes for real, objective appearances. He still believes he possesses a fleshly body. Realizing at last that he does not, he enters the third bardo of craving rebirth, and this desire drawing him with passion to earth, he is reborn and the intermediate state ends. With this explanation, I begin the summary. We are in a Tibetan home. The master is at the point of departing this life, and all about him know that the moment of the disintegrating process called death has come. The psyche is about to enter on a new life, the body to decay and to pass into other forms. Birth incarnated the soul complex. Death will now discarnate it. The proper steps must be taken to ensure its happy departure and safe guidance through the mysterious state which precedes reincarnation, or possibly the joyful and triumphant cessation of earthly births and deaths. The instructed lamas are summoned to give their aid. And first, when breathing is about to cease, the jugular arteries are gently but firmly pressed that the dying man may be kept conscious with a rightly directed consciousness. The ebbing vital current is, if possible, to pass out through the suture of the head, for according to yoga, the head is the chief center of consciousness, regulating other centers in the spinal column, and when the vital current is thus withdrawn, the lower parts of the body are devitalized, and there is concentrated functioning at the brain center. This being done, the dying man recalls to mind the whole of his past life before he passes from it. He recalls it in every detail. In the West, this is said to be the common experience of those who are virtually dead by drowning and who, on being reanimated, tell us that this was a feature of what has occurred. I have myself heard this at first hand. The state of dying clarity and perception passes, and at the actual moment of separation of soul and body, the consciousness of objects is lost. This state is known as the swoon, and in it is perceived the light of the higher consciousness, dealt with by the Vedanta and Buddhism as I have described in previous chapters. If the departing soul can now accept union with this high consciousness, he is a knower and secure from future rebirths. If he cannot, he is an ignorant being and is doomed to further pilgrimage on earth. All persons see this light on dying, and therefore all have the opportunity of escape if they are qualified to accept it. This must be so, for the light is the emanation of their own divinity. The light is spoken of in the Book of the Dead as such a dazzlement as is produced by an infinitely vibrant landscape in spring, an indescribably blissful inner experience. Yet the radiance is so great that it may inspire terror and flight to dimmer lights or shadows. Will the dying man, still perhaps the slave of his earthly experiences, recognize it as himself and so attain liberation from sad rebirth? Or will it dazzle him into flight toward the lesser lights which point the way to earth again? If he has reached the right point of development, if he is rightly supported, he may enter the sea of bliss, and all be well. With this aim, the Lama seated beside him reads in his ear the Thodol Bardo, the guidebook to the unknown land. O nobly born, the time has now come for you to seek the path of reality. Your breathing is about to cease. Your teacher has set you face to face with the clear light, and now you are about to experience it in its reality, wherein all things are like the void and cloudless sky, and the naked, spotless intellect resembles a transparent vacuum without circumference or center. At this moment, know yourself and abide in that state. That is, in the state of the higher consciousness. This must be read many times in the ear of the dying one, even before breathing has ceased. He must be turned over on the right side, which posture is called the lying posture of a lion. The Buddha lay thus, and so composed. Then, still speaking in the ear, the Lama says, O nobly born, that which is called death being now come to you, resolve thus. Oh, this is now the hour of death. By taking advantage of this death, I will so act for the good of all sentient beings as to obtain the perfect awakening by resolving on love and compassion toward them, and by directing my effort to the sole perfection. This is repeated distinctly to impress it on the mind of the dying person and prevent it from any wandering. When the breath has ceased, the instruction is to press the nerve of sleep firmly and thus exhort the dead man. Reverend Sir, now that you are experiencing the clear light, try to abide in that state. Recognize it. O nobly born, listen. Your present intellect is the very reality, the all-good. Recognize the voidness of your intellect, for that is awakening, and so keep yourself in the divine mind of the Buddha. And now, awakening in the first stage of the bardo, the intermediate state, and reviving from the swoon, the dead person thinks, am I dead, or am I not dead? He sees the weeping of his friends. He sees his body stripped for the shroud, the place of his sleeping rug swept, for he will need it no more. The Lama beside him reads in his ear, O nobly born, listen with due attention. Death comes to all. Do not cling in fondness or weakness to this life. There is no power in you to remain here. Be not attached to this world. Be not weak. Remember the holy trinity of the Buddha, the law, and the assembly. Bearing these words in heart, go forward. The following prayer is suggested to the dead man as suitable for his use. Alas, when the uncertain experience of reality is dawning upon me here, with every thought of fear or awe set aside, may I recognize whatever visions appear as the reflections of my own consciousness. When at this all-important moment, let me not fear the armies of my own thought forms. The Lama resumes as guide. When your body and mind were separating, you experienced a glimpse of the pure truth, subtle, sparkling, bright, glorious, and radiantly awful. In appearance like a mirage moving across a landscape in springtime, in one ceaseless flow of vibrations. Be not daunted, nor terrified, nor awed. That is the radiance of your own true nature. Realize it. From the midst of that radiance, roaring like 1,000 thunders, reality will come. That is the sound of your own true self. Be not daunted. Since you have no longer a material body, sounds, lights, and rays cannot harm you. It is sufficient for you to know that all apparitions are but your own thought forms. O nobly born, if you do not now recognize your own thought forms, the lights will daunt you, the sounds will awe you, the rays will terrify you. Should you not understand this, you will have to wander in rebirth. Thus, the spirit is visualized as within hearing distance and is exhorted and supported. After the funeral, an effigy of the dead is made by dressing a block of wood or some such thing in his clothes, and for the face substituting a printed paper called the Chang Ku, in which the central figure represents him in an attitude of adoration, legs bound, and surrounded by symbolical objects. Its inscription usually runs as follows. I, the world-departing one, here the name is inserted, adore and take refuge in my Lama confessor and all the deities both mild and wrathful, and may the great Pitié forgive my accumulated sins and impurities of former lives, and show me the way to another good world. This is visualized as the spirit of the deceased in the readings which follow. He must be instructed that he has been in a deep swoon of consciousness. Now he will awake with the formless blue of seeming space about him. Divine appearances advance toward him. He is exhorted to look upon the blue abysmal light without fear, and to remember that these mighty appearances are only the thought forms of his own past life, for in all the universe is in reality nothing but himself, and that of which he is a part. Let him not for an instant turn from the blue light of his own highest being, for it is the light of one who has become a Buddha, the light of wisdom. The dead man must put his faith in it, believe in it firmly, pray to it with all his heart and soul, and strength. He is to pray this prayer. May the Divine Mother of infinite space be my rear guard. May I be led safely across the fearful ambush of the bardo. May I be placed in the state of all perfect Buddhahood. Let him shun the dull light of his mere intellect and lower perceptions, for they can lead him only into the pitfalls of rebirth and hinder his reunion with the One. Here, in this world, must pass before him, assuming divine and fearful forms according to their nature, all the thought forms of which he was the creator on earth. Beautiful and terrible, in awful procession, they move before him like pictures upon a screen. But the knower in him, the divinity, is steadfastly exhorted to realize that these are phenomena and appearances of the earth, and that in all the universe there is but the One, and he himself is that. Realizing it, he can pass safely through the psychic dangers of this transitional state, which will determine whether he is capable of seeing the truth or whether he must still wander on earth, painfully evolving to the point where realization becomes possible. Let him see through these appearances to the ultimate, and be no longer deceived by their beauty or terror into belief that there is anything in the universe but that which is the universe and himself and all. This is repeated, enforced, driven home again and again. Now the earthly ministrant, the Lama, exhorts him to realize his own yogic powers. He is in the fourth dimension, no longer governed by the trammels of the flesh. O nobly born, your present body is not a body of gross matter. You have now the power to pass through hills, earth, houses, and mountains, straight forward or backward. You are endowed with the power of miraculous action, not as the fruit of discipline and ecstasy, but naturally. You can instantaneously reach what place you will, yet do not desire these powers of illusion and shape-shifting. Pray to the teacher. These powers only the yogin, and not the normal man, possesses in earthly life, and just as the yogin is warned against their use until he has attained pure spirituality, so is the traveller in the twilight land warned that until the perfect beauty of spirituality has flowered in him, he must not use them, even though he thinks they would help him now. He is merely to be steadfast and unalarmed, and to realize in quiescence that all he sees is but the projection of his own heart or brain upon the screen of his own consciousness. He is to watch it as the spectator of a show, knowing that it will pass and he will step out into the clear air of reality. But if he believes these hallucinations real, they will imprison him in earth's glamour once more, and inevitably drag him earthward into the old snare of the senses, for they are the creation of his earthly life. He is not to be misled, even by the apparitions of angelic beings or deities. These too are only the phenomena of his own thought forms. Steadily and fixedly, he must focus with prayer and desire upon the One. In the next stage, every lower instinct and craving is pulling him toward the desire of rebirth upon the earth he has left. Fierce is the struggle between this thirst of passion and the pure insight of the immanent spirit. Very few have reached the point where the latter is victorious over the greedy, clinging yearnings of the forms for all the familiar things of earth. Lonely are the stellar spaces, warm and desirable the hearth fire, and the fierce wind of an imperfect karma drives him earthward again, in spite of the struggles of the upward aspiring psyche. He must pray, O compassionate Lord of the precious Trinity, suffer it not that I fall into the unhappy worlds. And still the Lama exhorts, O nobly born, listen. What you are suffering comes from your own karma, past deeds and thoughts and character. Pray earnestly. Think not of your worldly goods. Think that you are offering them to the precious Trinity and your teacher. Create no impious thoughts. Pray. Then follow the instructions for closing the door of the womb, which offers itself as the gate of rebirth and draws him by some mysterious affinity. This is the last and hopeless struggle to escape rebirth, for insensibly and terribly he is drawing near that consummation once more. The clear light has become troubled and muddied. The earth desires are strengthening their hold. Again, the voice of the Lama is insistent in the man's ear. Be not distracted. The boundary line between going upwards or downwards is here and now. Giving way to indecision even for a moment, you will suffer lengthened misery. This is the moment. Hold fast to one single purpose. Cling to the chain of good acts. And now, still steadily declining toward earth, the discarnate one perceives the mating of men and women and is still drawn downwards to the gateway of the womb. If he is to be born as a male, the knower, the soul, begins to experience the feeling of maleness, to be torn with a feeling of hatred to its future father, of love to its future mother. This is strangely Freudian, and vice versa if it is to be born as a female. Again, the swoon takes it, but this time the swoon preceding birth, and it enters the embryonic stage in the womb with its doom pronounced by itself. Future wandering through births and deaths is to be its portion, until the time comes when on seeing the clear light it shall recognize it as itself and its own, and be one with it by instinctive knowledge and realization. Those who are voraciously inclined to this life, or who do not at heart fear it. Oh, dreadful, dreadful! Thus is completed the profound heart drops of the Bardo doctrine which liberates embodied beings. Here are one or two of the root verses of the Bardo, the prayer of the soul. Oh, now, when the Bardo of the reality upon me is dawning, abandoning all awe, fear, and terror of all phenomena, may I recognize whatever appeareth as being my own thought forms. May I know them to be apparitions in the intermediate state. Oh, now, when the bardo of taking rebirth is dawning, may the womb door be closed and the revulsion recollected. The hour is come when energy and pure love are needed. And again, when the cast of the dice of my life is exhausted, and the relatives of this world avail me not, when I wander alone in the bardo, let it come that the gloom of ignorance be dispelled. When the shapes of my own empty thought forms dawn upon me, may the Buddhas, in divine compassion, cause it to come that there be neither doubt nor terror in the bardo. When the bright radiance of the five wisdoms shines upon me, let it come that I, neither awed nor terrified, may recognize them to be of myself. It is to be noticed that in this state of transition in the formless world, the twilight bardo, there is no divine intervention whatever. Thought forms of deities indeed are projected upon the screen of the man's consciousness, but they have no real existence. The universe is one, and he a part of it. It is said in Tibet that these forms will take the appearance of whatever the man has believed on earth: the Christ, if a Christian; Muhammad, if a Mohammedan; the Buddha, if a Buddhist. The history I have given above is that of the normal man, who, having fallen short of the evolution which unites him with the One, and unable to perceive his unity with reality, is condemned by himself to rebirth. He re-enters the womb, that entry being conditioned by affinity, and again begins his pilgrimage. It will be observed how this northern Buddhist conception of karma in direct individual rebirth differs from the more subtle primitive Buddhist conception of the character of the dead being alone handed on to another being, as a torch is passed from one grasp to another in the torch race. Both are only symbols or earthly phenomenal conceptions of an infinite truth. So would the yogin say who has attained perfect cosmic perception. His own conception of death and entry by that gate into the formless world, of course, differs entirely from that of the average man. The yogin, he who by training and discipline on earth was enabled even then to enter the formless, the fourth-dimensional world and use its forces, he who has dwelt in the serene radiance of the clear light during his experience of living in the fleshly body, whose bounds he could so easily transcend. Such a man has nothing to fear in the bardo. No sights of forms, deific or otherwise, can mislead him. No horrors repel him. The clear light can be borne by his accustomed eyes. He enters and is absorbed in the One, into bliss unspeakable and incomprehensible to the man who does not possess his knowledge. Can the man who falls into rebirth recall his former births? Here the Buddha is explicit, as I have said before. If he desires to be able to call to mind his temporary states in days gone by, so that he may say, "In that place, such was my name, my family, my caste," that object will be attained by the state of self-concentration. If the mind be fixed on the acquirement of any object, that object will be attained. In other words, by the discipline of yoga, the deep of the subconscious, which, in Professor James's words, is the abode of everything that is sublatent, may be probed and the seemingly vanished memories be recovered. As says the Buddha, thus he calls to mind the various appearances and forms of his past births. This is the first stage of his knowledge. Darkness has departed and light come, the result due to one living in meditation and subduing his passions. It is interesting to consider this doctrine of hallucinations after death, derived from life experiences. In this way, we may account for the dream cigars and brandies and sodas desired and enjoyed by the departed spirits if a medium can get in touch with their consciousness. We may therefore, knowing this, condone the follies they utter, their dreamed Christian or other heavens. There are indeed many developments of modern spiritualism to be accounted for by this Tibetan psychology. Does the human spirit in its chain of rebirths ever assume an animal form? Naturally, the divine in a man cannot do so and need not, for the divine is latent in all forms of life. But the laws of Manu hold that the vital spirit in man, which is not divine, may by misuse incarnate in the lower forms of life. The belief of the higher occultists and philosophers is that even this is impossible, and that just as the steadfast evolution or karma of a plant renders it impossible for it to change into any unallied form, so, when the pattern of humanity is once stamped upon him, it is impossible for the man to unite with or manifest himself in any other form. He may degenerate into a savage man, but never into the subhuman. Dr. Evans Wentz quotes some interesting remarks of Huxley's, that famous scientist and warrior of the doctrine of evolution. In the theory of evolution, the tendency of a germ to develop according to a certain specified type is its karma. It is the last inheritor and last result of all the conditions that have affected a line of ancestry which goes back for many millions of years to the time when life first appeared on the earth. As Professor Rhys Davids aptly says, the snowdrop is a snowdrop because it is the outcome of the karma of an endless series of past experiences. This has interest as coming from Huxley, for though it misses the spiritual meaning of the great philosophical conception of karma, it recognizes its strong scientific verity. His statement does not walk in the regions of the bardo, but it may very well define the blind impulses and yearnings impelling the man or the snowdrop to perpetuate existence upon earth so far as each is able, although in the case of the man the spirit strives against the material envelope and its desires with groanings which cannot be uttered. Other great faiths have aimed at this conception, but have not stated it clearly. It would seem that a new and most desperately urgent prayer might be added to the litany. From the thought forms and illusions we create and mistake for reality, good Lord, deliver us. Yet most certainly this Tibetan teaching on death is a gospel of joy. These evils, these sins, are nightmares, dissolving like wreaths of mist in the dawn of truth. For when a man realizes himself, they are not only gone, they never existed. He laughs as he goes on his way. What an infantile science of psychology is that of the West, compared with the clear, deep knowledge and experience of the East, the outcome of 5,000 years' study. I have seldom felt it more profoundly than in reading this book of the strange lands guarded with snowy peaks, where so few penetrate, where life and death assume aspects very different from those of the crowded city life of the West. Yet, call it what we will, the bardo lies before all, and life is the stair which ascends to it and to its infinite possibilities, from the city as from the steppe. Tibet is a strange country. Its art reflects its stern and terrible outlook. Many of its pictures and deities are known to me in brilliant and gloomy colours, contrasting the hope of the virtuous man with the terrors awaiting him who has created the nightmares which will break his peace. In that sleep of death, what dreams may come? A question very terribly asked and answered in this book of the shadowy regions we shall all explore, and soon. Travelling as I have done among the mountains of Little Tibet, I have realized how in a country so desolate, its imagery must necessarily take the shape of stark truth in all its terrors. The terrors indeed stand visibly about the way and demand their answer. But death and life are lonely, whether among the mighty mountains or in the roar of great cities, and in the awful Tibetan solitudes or in the veiling loveliness of Ceylon, where I write now, the clear perception of reality is apparent as the only guide for the blindness of man.